back to today's video. Today is Saturday, August 9th, 2025, and today I was taking a look at G. Elliott Morris's website, Strength in Numbers. I'll link it in the description box down below. They have a number of different resources that are arguably just as great as the ones that we saw on 538, and I'm not sponsored or anything, and it's not why I'm telling you this. I was looking at it, and I actually intended to make an entirely different video with the data that was being provided around Donald Trump's approval that I will make tomorrow, but I haven't made a video like this in quite some time. You can tell what it is from the title of this video, but we're looking at an electoral college map based on Donald Trump's approval rating, and I actually haven't been able to find that as an aggregate and as a means relative to the last presidential election. So you actually can find that on this website. You can get it down here. You'll see that Trump's approval rating, 54% disapproval and 42.3% approval, about a net negative of about 12 points across the country. And the reason why I found it so interesting is that because we don't have resources like we used to with 538 and other major groups, it's really great to see this data again visualized and plotted on a map. And I haven't been able to do so in a very long time. And I stumbled across it today and realized, why not make a video talking about the 2028 election based on Donald Trump's approval rating? Now, as Donald Trump's approval rating is underwater on all key issues, this is primarily what we'll be talking about in tomorrow's video, the focus is going to be on a state-by-state basis. What G. Elliott Morris has given us is that estimates from a model that takes the results of the 2024 election and adjusts them to match Trump's current national approval rating is exactly what we're looking at here. So taking a look at some of these results, taking a look at the last election and comparing it across these states is really, really interesting. And so that's an overall spread here. Good examples are, some of these battleground states where Donald Trump's approval rating really is underwater at this point, especially relative to where he was in the last cycle. And so if we are to take those data points and actually plot them on a map, you'll find that there's a big reason why there is heavy expectation that despite Democrats not doing as hot in the generic ballot and not performing as well, there's still wide expectation that Democrats actually perform well enough in the 26 midterms, and that's largely because midterms are referendums on the incumbent president. And based on the data that we see right now with Donald Trump's approval rating, there is that underlying message and tone of Democratic messaging, just broad strokes, about Donald Trump being unpopular. And even if Democrats have a lower approval rating than Republicans and a lower approval rating than Donald Trump himself, what the midterm elections will be about is not about how much people like Democrats or arguably even like Republicans. It will be about how Donald Trump is handling his second time in office. And based on the map we're already looking at right now, chances are voters aren't happy about it. But because I wanted to take a look at an electoral college map basis of this here, I want to first iterate that I am very, very clear that I do not think that approval rating and actual electoral performance go hand in hand to the degree that a direct translation of approval rating to electoral performance would suggest. I don't think just because Donald Trump is underwater, you might have already seen in the preview, in Wisconsin by 12.3% based on the national numbers, that he loses, or that, J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio loses the state by 12.3% in the next election. All this is taking a 2028 electoral college map and mapping it based on Donald Trump's approval rating, just to show you that in some cases, how severe the negative approval rating of a president really can be. And I will say this too. For the people who are looking at this and say, we should talk about this from the Biden angle, I think that we arguably did a lot the last cycle. But looking at it from that perspective, Kamala Harris won states like Virginia and Minnesota and New Hampshire that Joe Biden's approval rating was underwater in the last election. And so these are things that, again, don't directly translate to electoral victories for the GOP or for the Democratic Party, but do give you a general indication of how the American public views the current administration, and that can sometimes be that predictive factor. Now, we're going to stick to our traditional ratings. 15 points or more is safe. 5 to 15 points is likely. Visualize that looks like this. Looks here. Lean is anywhere between 1 to 5%, and anywhere less than a point is a tilt margin. So what we're going to do is go across these states, and we're going to characterize them pro-Republican or pro-Democratic based on what the approval rating is. Now, I'm sure you can suggest and already see that across the West Coast, these numbers aren't great for Donald Trump. Safe, pretty much across the board, and that makes sense. If you look over in the Eastern Shoreboard, you're going to find the same thing. Maryland is safe blue. Delaware is safe blue. Jersey moves back to being safe blue. So does New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, even New Hampshire, even Maine, all become safe Democratic states. And that makes sense. For a president who's down double digits nationwide, it is heavy expectation that,
if Donald Trump is down 12 points, maybe it does make sense that Maine is down 20, right? If they vote against him already, and they weren't thrilled with him before, chances are they're not thrilled with him now. And so finding these adjustments, you're going to see that the first district is going to be safe. That second district doesn't exactly get over into the safe column, but that's where we're at. And it isn't too far to make that, conclusion. Virginia becomes a safe state. Illinois becomes a safe state. These are states, again, that were more competitive than the last cycle, but aren't going to be that way under these metrics. New Mexico, Colorado pretty much round us out in terms of safe states for the Democratic side, but I think we actually might have Minnesota joining the bunch. But besides that, I don't think many of these other states are going to be safe. If I'm missing one, we'll find out in a few moments. But as of now, you're pretty much here. Nebraska's second district should join it too, but it brings Democrats to about 226. Now, I don't think this is any coincidence that the 226 electoral votes of states that already voted against Donald Trump in the last cycle would largely not approve of him. And, that makes sense to me. These are states that, when faced with the option of voting for Donald Trump, decided in some cases, states that we might otherwise deem as more competitive, decisively voted against him. In Colorado by 11 points, in New Mexico by 6 points, in Virginia by 6 points, in New Hampshire by 3 points, even better than Clinton's margin in 2016. Minnesota, better than Clinton's margin in 2016. So these states that were already on the verge of being, in some cases, likely states or in some cases, safe states for Kamala Harris, even though she lost the presidency in every single battleground state, don't expect me to be shocked when I see numbers like this. And remember, thinking about the 2018 midterms, that's exactly what this type of approval rating for Donald Trump on a state-by-state basis actually ushered in. In many of these governor races, the way that voters viewed Donald Trump resulted in Democrats winning Michigan by 11 points, Pennsylvania by 15 points, Colorado by 12 points, right? New Mexico by 15 points. It was these level of approval ratings that flipped Illinois against an incumbent Republican by 16, 17 points. So getting back to this map here, let's talk about some of the safe Republican states. And there actually aren't as many as you might think. States like Idaho and Wyoming and North and South Dakota, not Nebraska, not Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia. Hopefully I remember all those states. If we go through it again, Idaho, let me double check Utah on that. No, it was not Utah. It was Wyoming and North and South Dakota. It was Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, or maybe I'm glossing over Mississippi. It was not Mississippi. It was Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia. Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia. Remove Mississippi. And then if we go ahead and actually throw over in terms of actual breakdown by district, we'll remember that it was Nebraska's first that was overwhelmingly Trump, but Nebraska third, that was overwhelmingly Trump. The first was not. So we'll do Nebraska's third as safe for Trump in terms of net approval. And then moving over here, I mean, we are really losing a lot of these states here that might otherwise have been overwhelmingly in favor of Donald Trump. And don't, again, lose this in translation. A lot of these voters that might be not so great with Donald Trump, especially on the national level and especially on many of these issues, will still very much vote for J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio or whoever it might be in 2028. And I want that to be very, very clear. I think that this is something that just gives us a general trend line of how voters view Donald Trump, but not to the degree of how they will vote. They will very much vote for the GOP, even if some of these states are not so happy with him. And that brings me to the likely states. States like Montana and Utah that are okay with Donald Trump, but not to the degree that they were in the last cycle. And again, that makes sense. Nebraska, Kansas, these are states that joined the ranks as, pretty locked in for the GOP, that I would argue, but aren't thrilled with the way that, the administration is going. So states like Louisiana and Mississippi and South Carolina and Indiana and Missouri pretty much join those groups as states that are decided by, likely margins. I'd say Indiana is there, Mississippi is there, Louisiana is there, South Carolina and Missouri, I believe right now, though, unfortunate for the president, are not there just yet. And so that brings us to here, bringing the Democrats up to 226 seats, Republicans at 96. Again, this is really where it falls apart. Right? In the remainder of these seats, you're going to find that, Republicans narrowly pull ahead in Missouri. They narrowly pull ahead in South Carolina. They only narrowly eke by in Texas, but they're underwater in Florida. They're underwater in Iowa. They're underwater in Ohio. And arguably, what does that mean? I mean, it is really laughable. In no reality are Democrats winning Iowa. In no reality are Democrats winning Ohio. But to the degree that voters are not thrilled with Donald Trump, I can believe. I can believe that, yes, there are voters out there that don't find large interest in Donald Trump right now and aren't thrilled with him. I'm going to fill out the remainder of this map so we can just do some more high-level takeaways here. But you'll find states like Wisconsin and Michigan turn on the president as soon as he gets into office, and that really isn't that surprising. Places like Maine's 2nd District become that way. North Carolina becomes likely. Georgia becomes likely. Arizona, Nevada, all states that voted for the president in the last cycle become likely states for the Democratic Party. And again, a lot of it has to do with the way they view him and not as much as to how they will vote. But just taking a look, I think maybe I'm off about Alaska here, a tilt state, it brings us to this electoral map. I know some right-wing accounts probably going to clip this on Twitter and say, this is my prediction for 2028, but I want to be clear. This just shows how voters view Donald Trump. This shows how the nation is responding to this second Trump administration. And while there have been so many high-level takeaways around 2026 being nothing like 2018, to a degree, you are right. But in some cases, I could even argue that 2026 might end up being worse for Donald Trump, even if that House number looks roughly similar to what we see in 18. Because what it will take Democrats to get to this point is exactly what led them to victory in 18, but the hurdles will be more. And the type of messaging will be different. And the engagement in this cycle will be dramatically different than anything Democrats have put forth this century. And they are at a point where there is a president who has dropped an approval rating tremendously fast, to the same degree that he did in his own first term, but in some cases, even worse off, depending on where he is. Tremendously worse than where Biden was at this point 4 years ago. Biden had a net approval of plus 8.25%. Today, Trump is down by 12. That is a 20-point difference between a president who ended up with a lower approval rating than Trump did after January 6th by the time he left office. If that shows you just how fast Trump's support has deteriorated from the time he has started in office. And while I do not believe Democrats will come close at all to the degree of victory that is projected by a simple approval rating metric, I do think it tells us that voters are upset. And explains why, that despite the disaffection with the Democratic Party and the national generic ballot not being as pro-Dem as it was in 2018, that map can explain it all. This map can show that the way that voters find their disapproval of Donald Trump to the degree that they find it, this point being egregious against the GOP, can explain why Democrats truly believe 2026 will go their way. And while it may not mean that 2028 will go their way, this is a daunting set of circumstances going into a midterm cycle, and we are only a year and a half out. And as much as this cycle may not feel in energy like 2018, and for many reasons it should not, but for the Democratic Party, in terms of turning this midterm as a means of a foil against Donald Trump, we have reached that point where voters are not happy, and that if you were to extrapolate Trump's approval rating and put it onto an electoral map, it would usher in the largest electoral feat that Republicans have seen defeat since Bill Clinton in 1996, trumping that even, no pun intended, of the Clinton victory of 1992. And while again, if Democrats are to win the next presidential cycle, I cap them at roughly around 320 electoral votes. The fact that this map is what you get when you throw Trump's approval rating relative to the last presidential election, it really should scare the GOP, because it puts them in a tremendously difficult position to even maneuver to an electoral victory that is feasible in 2026. It certainly is there in 2028 and certainly can be won. But based on these numbers that we're seeing, based on these metrics, based on Trump's own approval rating, the Republican Party is in trouble for the 2026 midterm elections. And seeing it visualized, it could mean trouble for the 2028 election that we have no idea of how it's going to go. Because Biden's approval rating falling at the end of his first year pretty much predicted the inevitable loss for Democrats in 2024. Donald Trump's approval rating, starting at such a bad position, and now trendlining to roughly where it was 8 years ago, and based on where it was in 2017, was tracking for an eventual loss in 2020. What we've seen is that these things are pretty standard. And the way the American public engages with an administration like this one can often foretell an election, and these midterms are going to be the closest ones for that to happen. And so based on this data that I'm seeing, I would rather be a Democrat than a Republican for midterm odds in 2026, especially with a president who doesn't seem to be showing any signs of change or improving an approval rating that's already in such an abysmal condition. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter at the top left of the screen. There's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join on the screen. There's a video for you to watch and then a playlist for my 2028 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.